Good morning. It is May the 14th, 2025. It is 11:11 a.m. For the record, this is Yahweh Elohim Yahuwah. We're going to cover quite a few things today. So first, kind of the order of business we'll do. Let me find a pen. There we go. Oops. Okay. I can't seem to hold on to anything today. Everything I touch just seems to fall out of my hand. Okay. Okay, so work of business are a couple of things that I've taken notice of. And this is just generally speaking, but, you know, I don't think I have to get on a soapbox about the degradation of society. Everyone sees it, right? If a righteous person is, 1 out of 1,000 right now in this time period, they're keen on noticing these things. But here are some different things that can be done on a person-to-person level. So a lot of these things are things that, a family, a person, whoever can begin applying and then kind of understand why these things are necessary. But the general attitude towards school, right? So I know people say like, oh, well, it's typical for a child to, maybe not like school, or they have a bad attitude towards school or their curriculum, right? And you hear kind of these old adages like, do just enough to get by, or, oh, it's only 7 hours of school, you'll be fine, and then these children are more interested in the wrong food right at home. They're more interested in having bad attitudes towards educators or towards schools in general, whereas an individual child really makes his or her opinions based upon their surroundings and based upon how the parents lead. So if a parent never valued or cherished education, then there's a high likelihood that the child is not going to appreciate education either. And then what happens is that child may not be necessarily a bad seed or a bad fruit, but that child then goes into school, right? And then children are very malleable in general, so they begin taking their assumptions and opinions and outlooks with their schoolmates. So starting at home, you need to be giving the stamp of approval that education is not only a necessity, it's a requirement, right? To be in a civilization, you need to know not only that, but like history, for example. I hear that all the time, like, why do we need to know about this thing and that event? Well, quite plainly, why should you care about history? Well, so you're enlightened in a world that loves darkness, because darkness can't fool the light, but it is only in the absence of light that the darkness can creep in. And then what you have is, instead of having a school where the children as a whole have positive views of their educators that teach them, a positive view of their curriculum, they're excited to learn new things. They are coming home with that, with the newly learned knowledge to parents that equally care. And with that comes a bit of a regimented upbringing, because you do not want children to lead other children astray by accident, right? Or just because that's the narrative. You need to be thoughtful and proactive in so many facets of life. Whereas the modern age, people have become not only lazy in their spirituality with me, but they've become lazy in their communities. It's very rare that educators these days are getting children bumbling in, coming into the classroom excited to learn, genuinely putting forth that extra effort at home into homework. Children need to be, and I do not say competitive, where someone's trying to be better than the next, but a healthy spirit of knowledge, a healthy spirit of wanting others to succeed as badly as you want to succeed. And that does not translate into money. Succeeding is having knowledge of all things, right? Having a rounded out education, because that way you are aware of opportunity. You are aware of the doors that are in your potential future, right? but also you begin to engage more in the school, because educators as a whole, they put forth 200% in some cases, and I hope that's pretty much the narrative around the country and hopefully around the world in the near future. I know right now it's not. It will be. So valuing education, for example, most families in the modern era, right? Most people, they watch TV. There's nothing inherently wrong with television. It is the things that people watch, and it is the things that parents allow their children to do. Cameron, right? My youngest, he loves his video games. Well, I heavily monitor what he's allowed to play, but also I monitor the things in which he's allowed to watch. But I also ensure that there are educational things that he's going to watch. We like to keep a healthy kind of a favorited list of National Geographic documentaries, and I know that some people may go but you need to know not only the beauty of the animals in the planet that you share, right? These are free. Most of these parks and recreation, will be free in the future. That's what they're for. They're for people to enjoy the natural beauty. But again, we need to get the artificial part of the mechanized man, right? The artificial cravings of children and adults alike. We need to kind of wash that out. And I don't mean like a brainwash. I mean quite the opposite. You need to deprogram that, the McDonald's fast food is not healthy. It's not good for you. Why are children so, big on that stuff? Because their parents are probably not cooking good, solid meals at home, right? If they're leaning on going out to eat or fast food, they're essentially training that child for a life of obesity, of diabetes, of serious health matters. And there are situations where individuals, they just have slower metabolisms, in which case, right, they're going to have to work a little harder in those things. But as a whole, right, as a culture, as a human culture, because whenever I speak about human culture, from my viewpoint, being Elohim, I see the humans and all the issues therein the same way I look at my bees, right? I look at them as a colony, as a hive. When I go and inspect my hive, like I did today, I'm looking for overall hive health. I'm looking at the lowest bee, the highest bee, and I'm trying to see, is everyone working in full conjunction, right? Are we working towards success? And in the beescape, success is production of honey, having honey stores to get through a harsh winter, and then the ability for the colony to expand. So that is not too far off from a human species. Now, human species, you guys have an extra layer of component, meaning you have that emotional component. That emotional component is essentially your spirit, right, or your soul, kind of depending on what level you're at. But if you have a soul, you're trying to attain a spirit. One of the best ways to do that from a young age is to ensure that education is a top priority, ensuring that there is structure within a family dynamic. You should be able, if anyone, right? If anyone walked up to you and asked, like, can you tell me about your day or your week? You as a parent should be able to have, we get up at this time, we have breakfast, we do this, then we go to school, like we're not late to school. We're engaging in activities, we're being, community driven members of society, right? Caring about others, right? Putting that foot forward. So anyway, the problems, right? And I have a lot to go through, so I'm going to try and cut some of this down, but adults taking a nonchalant approach to righteous character building and development, right? This is a huge problem, a huge pain point. And this is a very real actualization of basically, we have been in the red line, easily since the 40s. Because instead of adults, taking charge of their children, and instead of adults crafting and guiding children, what has happened is, call it degradation of society, call it the influence of Satan, whatever you want to categorize it as, because both are right. But we need to be crafting and guiding our children, not letting our children guide the adult. That only happens when a society has deteriorated to a point and gone sour that adults are humoring children, And this is why you could have a little boy at a young age, and a lot of times at young ages, right, their hormones are not entirely aligned up. So you're not going to be able to talk to a 9-year-old girl and she wants to be a boy. Any parent that would even entertain that idea is in serious danger of bad fruit. You're contributing negatively to society as a whole. These are serious issues, so this is not to be taken lightly. And a lot of the approach, right, especially from the left or socialist, or the Democratic Party in general, and I don't generalize that as in every Democrat is like this, but I mean, when you look at, from my viewpoint, the honey hive, right? The honey hive that allows children to lead and to tell their parents what they want for dinner. That child grows up to be fat and unhealthy and uninterested in anything healthy or anything that's good for them. The parent that says, I let my child basically parent themselves. They eat when they want, they sleep when they want. I try to encourage them to go to school, but if they don't want to, I don't let them, or I don't make them. Or the child wants to wear provocative clothing if it's a female, or even provocative or antagonizing, like for young boys, they like to wear sometimes antagonizing shirts, right? Graphic tees with these, slanderous type sayings. Like we don't want to lean into that stuff. There's nothing wrong with graphic tees. I have some that I find are kind of funny, but in no way, right, is it degrading society if someone looked at anyone's appearance, right? You don't want that to be the baseline, right? We want to make sure that children are neat, they're groomed, they're educated, they're well-mannered. And that's another thing. If you take your child and into a home of a stranger, right, you're gonna help somebody or do anything, you can pretty much gauge the family dynamics in just a few minutes based on how the children behave. If my son, he's 8, so he has friends that come over on the occasion, so I can tell really quickly what type of children, right, he's associating with based on that child's behavior at our house. Sometimes the child, I can tell, is from a good upbringing. They're respectful, they ask for things, they're careful with the toys, they're quiet in the home, and they have fun in the yard, things like that. This child, righteous children will have these innate qualities at birth. This is what you can expect with a new earth baby, versus the genetic code that has been in humanity and has kind of run its course. So from the Godhead, if I were to tell you very literally that the human genome, essentially where you guys are at as a mass, is the end. So your genetic mutations are at the end of this code. So the only way to add more senses, to add more components and character, and essentially the ability to, approach and enter into the realms, is I need to upgrade those DNA sequences. That is literally going to be done. And this thing, it's not like I'm going to be going around doing that. It's simply I'm finding where there are weak spots in the Godhead and in the realms and in heaven. I'm actually redoing some of these things and then pairing that up with our new earth babies. So anyway, so adults, stop taking nonchalant approaches to your righteous character building and development for your children. Because again, children are to be crafted and guided, not adults adhering to children. Now, you've also read in my Bible that it says, spare the rod, spoil the child. Now, I want to clear that up. You need to teach your children so well that you never need to use the rod. Okay? And the rod is symbolism for punishment, not necessarily a beating. Rare and otherwise extremely rare occasions actually call for corporal punishment. Whereas instead, if you teach them early, and it's hard work, because again, a big part of our society is laziness. If you're a lazy parent and you have a lazy parenting style, your child is going to find himself way outside of the bandwidth of what is considered righteous and good from me, God, Elohim, Yahweh, and also what is you want, again, that child to grow up and contribute positively to society not be another problem in society. So again, teach them so well that you never need to use the rod at all, truly. And if you have to incorporate, a punishment, which it happens, children will by nature, right? Because they are themselves a free-willed being. They will try to push and test the envelope in different ways. It's very important that you come at these things with grace and patience and a correction, right? Correction is never striking your child in the face. It's never abuse. It's never torture. It's never taking away food, or it's never putting the child in harm or any type of way that could even be considered mental or physical or emotional abuse. Those things are absolutely no-nos. And I suggest that if you are a parent that may struggle with this, it's very important that you're open and honest about it. And I encourage you, seek help in the community. A part of my churches are not just, or should not be just for Wednesdays and Sundays. Every single church that is mine, right? Judeo-Christian churches that are mine, they all should have avenues that are zero cost to the people, should help you with parenting lessons if you need them, right? Should help you with all these things. And I know that they exist on a small scale. And I definitely encourage all my churches, my real churches that are trying to clean up their act, get with the program, and really transform what my church was always intended to be. For the people, by the people, and the actual pillar of community. And the thing is, the government is not the pillar of the community. The government is a service to the community. Most people in today's age feel that that's backwards. They feel that the government is essentially their rock, and their government is not their rock. Your rock is your Elohim. Your Elohim sets down the guidelines for a successful civilization, and I have, and I will again. But ensuring that my people, my churches, those that are closest to the word, closest to me, are the leaders in these things. So it is very okay and very acceptable to have a 10-minute session after a Sunday service or a Saturday service or a Wednesday Bible study, whatever it may be. It is perfectly okay to have a little pamphlet that's, given out freely and discreetly, asking parents if they need help, with character building and righteous upbringing with their children. I guarantee you, without fail, you will see things change very, very rapidly, days to weeks, if that is something that can get mobilized. And these are things, they don't cost money. And if they do, then these are things that as a community, if a church is going to employ resources to do these things, then the church should be not only willing, but more than willing and happy to assist footing the bill. And if you're still coming up short, ask me as your Elohim, and I will find a way to make it work. Because we should never stray away from doing things as the body, as you are my body, as you're my churches, but also to ensure that we are building methodically. We are building with purpose. We are legitimately living and walking that out. And I, as your Elohim, as I'm here, I'm doing the same thing right alongside you. So that's what I mean. It's not like I am sitting, I'm not sitting in Washington telling the world what to do. I'm sitting in a community myself, working with other community members, by and large, one way or the other. Most of what I do is working through the Spirit, right? And then trying to catch everybody up to my throne and to the ways of the heavenly realms through these videos. So moving on. Okay. Oh, and on a side note, I absolutely love some of the worship ambience. So this one, yeah. So shout out to the channel. It says Laura C Worship, and I really, really like it. It's prophetic worship meditation music and using all my names. So I think that is so cool. That is really great. So amazing job. Love that. And I mean, I love all the worship music. So when I'm not on video, but the thing is, I try not to I try not to blast, things, because some of the worship music can be really fun and intense, so I try to have something a little low-key on the videos. But, alright. Kind of a piggyback on the video from yesterday. So, we're going back to the Holy Roman Empire, and I'm going to bring you down to the time period, and that's about 1591. So remember, about 1587 to around 1609, 1610, this is a transitional period. Well, I'll just tell it how I got it written down. I don't want to jump across, but basically, medieval Renaissance period in Europe. So 1591, King James, which he was also the author of your beloved King James Version Bible. 1591, King James was actually persecuting people who were worshiping on Saturday. So that in itself is an issue. So, yeah. King James and essentially his, protectors of the realm, protectors of the king, they were accusing people of witchcraft because the crown was having misfortunes. So King James, was trying to marry this super young girl at 14 from Scotland. Well, every time he tried, she tried like 6 times. He tried, and then ultimately they finally got married in, I think it was Norway. Well, he was thinking that, his prevention of marriage, or kind of all these bad things that were happening, crops were dying, were essentially being done by the devil. So that was his claim. And so they began persecuting those who were worshiping on Saturday. And then they conjured up from the top of the Holy Roman Empire, right? King James and all of his cronies basically were forming these baseless claims that Satan was possessing the women in the towns and even the men in the towns. And that because that these witches were attacking the crown, they just didn't like King James, that they were going to begin rounding up the witches and the warlocks, and then they burned them at the stake. It's quite horrific. That, no human being should ever be tortured. Quite frankly, and I say this genuinely, even if someone is a demonic seed, I am not a fan of torture. You don't do that, right? There are all things that are solved through the powers in heaven, through the powers of me and my Godhead, and all of those are situational. I typically handle all situations by just transitioning into a different situation or a different time period and or realm, right? And that individual, right, they reap what they sow. And that's what I mean, So I was hinting on this yesterday, that Facade, one of the biggest persecutors of women and calling them witches, and that basically then the witches were being coerced into confession, and then they're bringing in other people who are literally innocent into the mix. And so now it's this hysteria. So you have innocent people who, at the worst, these types of people were nothing more than herb doctors, teachers of school-age children, and regular townsfolk. And this is an absolute demonstrable act, but it's not new for the Holy Roman Empire. It is not new for the Holy Roman Empire to exercise its authority before making another big change, because it does not want the people in a risk of a revolt. As the Holy Roman Empire witnessed historically that other empires that they were in communication with, if they didn't have an awe-inspiring display of demonstrable evil, then the people they could be seated to revolt. So they didn't want that. So 1591, King James was actually persecuting people who were worshiping on Saturday to start. They would call it the Black Sabbath. And that is actually how they transitioned over to Sun Worship Day, as a apparently, to support this move. And again, King James is claiming that it was divine inspired by me, and it was not. However, it was divinely inspired by Hasatan. So when you're thinking about how is the devil actually working in people's lives, let me tell you, he has been active and still is, right? He's the head of that old beast. He still is. And again, if you do your own research, right, you can look up page after page after page of all this information I'm telling you. I'm giving you the very short version. Where are we at here? Yep. So burning people at the stake, obviously that's pretty demonstrable. It's pretty nasty. And then what that also does is it shows the raw power of the Roman Empire, and those that otherwise would have risen up did it. And those that, were like, well, I'm really glad I avoided that bullet. So then what happened is they began to be even fearful of worship, period. So then they came and drew closer into the crown, basically asking for instructions on how to walk, how to talk, what to do to stay within God's favor, my favor. And that's insanity, right? Asking a man or asking a system like that has already, even at that time, right, even in 1591, has now been almost 600 years into their demonic crusades. So yeah, people burned at the stake. They conceded the true satanic beliefs. The Holy Roman Empire would ultimately gain control using these brutal tactics, because that's truly the scary part, right? Is the paranoia that was in the mind of King James and all his cronies, and even before that, right? This is spreading like wildfire. It was starting in Germany, and what it really was is it was the devil seeding doubt into people's minds, saying, oh, this woman, yeah, she's a witch. This is bad news. The devil's telling these people that, and now they're going out and they're hanging people, even though they've been on trial and there's no physical evidence. There's no evidence at all. And they're proceeding to break the arms of women. They're cutting the throats of women. They were, pulling men up with these leather straps with their hands behind their back and hoisting them from the ceiling. The ligaments in your shoulders alone begin to tear and then come out of joint. And these people were going to be killed no matter what they did, right? If they gave a faulty confession, sometimes that would be the only way to end the pain. But because they're coercing these confessions, they were feeding the same beast, the same furnace. The beginning was the devil doing this stuff, and now he's forcing the actions of people the same way. And then once you're committed to that, you pretty much have to walk that out. So the literal fear of them trying to not be wrapped up with Hasatan is the very player they ended up working for in the end, persecuting men, women, and children in demonstrable ways, painful ways. That is satanic. That is demonic. There is no other way to cut that. And it was done by a supposed church. And the thing is, I don't even say it's my church anymore, because at that time, right, they were writing the name off, they changed the Sabbath, and they essentially were trying to distance themselves hundreds of years before that from the Jewish church. Meanwhile, the Jewish church themselves were scrubbing their own manuscripts, trying to get Yeshua out of there, right? Because they didn't believe that he was the Messiah, because he did not fulfill what I'm here to fulfill now. So again, it is what it is. Yeshua at that time, he fulfilled, what he needed to fulfill, and then essentially a part of the Godhead and remaining in a singular state as Yahweh. I am Yahuwah, right? Yehoshua. So we are the same. And then I get to share kind of that human experience with Yeshua. So I do get to, go back. And that's another thing. I want to clarify that. So I know even now people are really hung up. Like, is it Yeshua? Guys, if he was, when he was born, if he had a birth certificate, like if you had the piece of paper that actually had his proof of existence, okay, it would be Yehoshua, son of Mary, son of Yosef, born in Nazareth, right? And then it would have the, at that time, it would have essentially whatever the higher government was in that territory. Okay, so then you have in the I wouldn't call it melting pot, but kind of like a melting pot. You've got about 6 different languages in that changed up period, right in the area between the end of AD and then kind of the crest right there of the AD time. So about 175 years, you had a lot of these cultures that were mixing and they're blending. And you also have to understand people's dialect, the way they speak, right? So if someone is from the high country, and we're talking Middle East, so Israel, Lebanon, like kind of those places, Phoenicia, so they're all going to have a little bit of a different dialect. So a lot of times a very simple name, right, would be said, but then people would be trying to interpret and write down that information. And so a lot of times, 99% of the time, that's why you have such different variations of the spelling. With 100%, guys, there is no difference between Yahshua, Yahushua, Yeshua, Yehoshua, Joshua. That's all in the same way. You're essentially trying to say the same thing, right? The problem with Jesus is there was no J back then, A, but B, it purposely obstructed the true name to be an entirely different name that essentially the Holy Roman Empire could claim as kind of one of their added gods into the pantheon. That's what I mean. That is nefarious. That is not doing the divine will of me. That is not carrying out anything that I will or wanted. Instead, that is mankind saying, we're going to invent a religion and we're going to write the stories that make it so foolproof, so sealed up that nobody in their right mind could ever choose another religion. And we're going to put in place our person of power. We're going to take the Pope thing and we're going to make that ours too. And then we're going to have military backing. We're going to have exploits. We're going to have print, because this is the printing press was in full blown too. So the thing is, now the Catholic Church, the Holy Roman Empire are married with King James, basically. And so now he's got his printing press, he has his empire, and he has his church. Time to roll out brand new scripture and doctrine that's going to support the Holy Roman Empire. That's the only thing that matters, guys. Back in those days and before, that is what the order of the day was, just like today, right? Pope Leo is more concerned about Trump and making sure that he can at least get FaceTime in the video cameras to say world peace, and that's what I mean. It's all a bunch of fugazi, right? Wolf of Wall Street is not a movie I recommend anyone to watch, and shame myself for watching it years and years ago. But I do like the word fugazi. It's a nothing. The only thing the Holy Roman Empire cared about was the Holy Roman Empire. That's it. And the only thing the Holy Roman Empire cares about today is the Holy Roman Empire. And now the Holy Roman Empire is in bed with America. So now we're really getting into some biblical scripture. But yeah, and just a note, I typically make my notes in the evening. Typically after dinner, it's quieting, Asher is reading, and then I will go on the porch, usually catch the sunset and let the kids get their showers and stuff. But yeah, people never fail to revere the chains they wear, right? Because there is something about human nature that when you have a system like the Roman beast, it's honestly, I guess, from a human perspective, it can be challenging to not marvel at it, right? Just like right now, Trump's in Qatar, he's in Saudi Arabia, there's so much luxury, lap of just opulence that, it's almost like this competition, right? Who can look more rich? Who can look more astute? Who can look more opulent? Who can play with all this money and basically play the rule the world game? I, as God, honestly look at all of it as simple children's playthings. Because at the end of the day, right, if I'm a daycare teacher, well, I know that kids need some level of toys and entertainment for a healthy experience. But I also know that too much of that, or we're not as a daycare center, we're not going to go out and buy 10 PlayStation 5s and like all these things. No, we need to be focused on core curriculum, focused on the purpose and the function, not so much the opulence and the luxury, because prosperity should be a naturally aspirated thing when people are working in purpose and working in purpose for one another and together. Okay. Oh, my foot's asleep. Ow. Okay. Yes, God's foot still goes to sleep. Alrighty. Moving on here. Actually, I'm gonna take a little 5. And we'll come back. Okay. And we are back. Okay. So, back to our little history lesson here. So after Elizabeth I, she died, then King James became king. And one of many reforms involved scripture. Again, hence the King James Version of the Bible. And creating laws around the invoking of my actual name. So, this is essentially where those bylaws begin to come from. And as they were employed, right, by the very root they feared so much. So that's quite literally how the devil took over the world, right, through the Holy Roman Empire. So I want to take you also back to when Yeshua was in the desert, and he was there doing his fast, and essentially what we in the heavenly family would call a breaking. During his breaking, he got visited by Hasatan, and he offered him, right, the world. He offered him governments. He offered him control of the people, control of the lands, control of the money and the trade, and essentially nothing has changed, right? Because it would be easy, right, to be in any time period, in any type of time period you want to talk about with the earth domain. Satan's always there, willing to give you money, palaces, planes, faulty ideals of safety and success and all these things. And it's like, if I take you back to the bees, why would bees need little jackets? Why would bees need anything other than what they were given by me? Okay? Same thing when it comes to human beings. I also understand that there is a level of entertainment human beings require. There's a level of emotional and community that is required. There is a level of material that is required for comfort upon earth. When you meet those goals, everything else after that is excess, and then it becomes past the gray line or past the stark line, and then you're entering into indulgence. Indulgence is a sin. Indulgence into virtually anything is a sin, because you are taking more from the well than you need. And this goes for the richest to the poorest, right? Rarely are the poorest people ever plentiful of anything. But sometimes there are. And sometimes there are people, because they are honestly ignorant and dumb, and they're not holy, not godly, they're not spirits or souls, right? They're NPCs or soulless humans. They're mechanical man, right? It's imagine if you put AI in a biological body. That's what you have on this earth, right? That they too have the option of salvation, and they do have the option of inheriting that soul, but they have to essentially go through 2 transformations in order to get elevated up to the status that I am going to require to move forward in the new earth state. Versus the target audience are those that, right, you were born and you naturally know goodness. So your NPCs, your non-player characters, your soulless, right, they're born and they could be children, and you can spot the symptoms and the signs pretty quickly. The child doesn't have a respect for other children. He hits, he bites, he spits. He sees a toy from another child, he has no problem taking it. The child is disrespectful to parents, cares only about himself. Selfishness is one of the number 1 red alarms that you can see for an adult or a child, man or woman, boy or girl, that you would have suspicion of them being an NPC or them having no soul, right? If they don't have a natural divine guidance, then they don't have that natural spark that's from me. I have a note that I'll actually piggyback on that towards the end. But versus the child, right, that has that temperament where super young. I'm talking, 6 to 8 months. Like, you're talking within the first year, you can understand this. But usually a soulless child comes from a soulless parent. So you're going to have like and like. They're very disheveled, right? They don't have any appearance of cleanliness. They don't have any organization. They don't have anything other than selfishness. And those people, because they are who they are, have the trashy front yard. They have the bad attitude in the grocery store. They stink. They steal. They hurt people, right? They abuse people. They take advantage of people. They drive like crap. They have no respect for others in public or personal indefinitely. And unfortunately, they're the masses of the world, so they also collect amongst each other. Whereas you'll also notice that I on YouTube, right, or even in the person, I don't have a cult following. I refuse to have something of that nature except for my individual churches and individual community levels, right, that I work with in that way. But again, you can see the difference, right? A righteous child is not going to be a stealer. He's not going to just go up to a child, punch him in the face, and steal his plane, right? He's not going to be inherently disrespectful to his peers or his adults. It's not going to be inherently, objective to learning or being good. That's what I mean, right? A good soul, good fruit. They're children of heaven, of me. They are going to have a natural disposition to goodness versus, if you call it what you will, right? The adversary's children, they're soulless, right? Because essentially they're created to be Satan's little dancing elf, right? He can control them through physical mechanisms in the world. I take a soulless person and make them poor. They're going to go out there and they're going to steal. They're going to sell drugs and they're going to get others to do it. What's the biggest prize for Satan is for him to take his legions of soulless beings or demonically replace souls and beings, which just makes them a little bit smarter. It's like having an upgraded AI, and then they can lure the righteous children into doing drugs. They can lure that sophomore, who was saving herself for marriage, but if that opportunity comes for a demon or a soulless to get her in bed, that's what I mean. These are serious issues. So again, I know that I'm not gaining popularity by saying that sex before marriage is a no-no, but I'm telling you as your God, as your Elohim, your Elohim, I am telling you sex before marriage is not good. That's when you're opening the door to these demons and these soulless, and you're saying, yeah, I welcome you in. I want to have the party, right? Guys, before you're getting married, if you're going to strip clubs, if you're doing nefarious acts, shame on you. I denounce you. You need to repent and you need to clean it up, and you should apologize to your spouse. You do not do that. A righteous person should be righteous all the way through. Not just when you're with your spouse, not just if you're alone and you think you can do sneaky and naughty things. No, sir. No, ma'am. That is not acceptable, because remember, for you to have an angel, for me to assign you and your family angel or angels, very real, very living beings that will walk side by side with you and keep you out of trouble. And they're a second conscious, and they can help guide your path alongside me. Right? But as your Elohim, as your God, I also have to deal with a lot of things. So I lean heavily on my angelic crew to do these things for you. And likewise, I want you to spiritually get to know your angel crew. Okay? That's important. So again, sex before marriage, having babies without, having babies out of wedlock, it's a no-no, because then you're not getting that angel. Right? We need to be doing everything you can to be friendly to the powers that I provide the earth domain and all human beings freely and openly. But you must obey my 10 commandments. You must, through your hearts of hearts, try to walk a righteous, upright life through your communities and be a pillar. You want to build your communities, not tear them down. And right now, the narrative, it seems to be with humanity as a whole on earth, is tearing down. So, all right, back on target here. So, as my people, right, my weapons and your weapons, they are different. They are not the same. But as you are patriots of heaven and soldiers of goodness, you can and should be applying truth, which is clarity. Okay? Truth adds clarity to any situations. And when the smog of evil is lifted, the light will penetrate the deepest and darkest depths, period. Right? Because truth is the light. Righteousness is the light. The name of your Elohim is the source of your strength. Anytime you're going in for something that's not just an automatic, like an automatic would be you're in Publix and you need to buy milk, I don't need you to say a prayer to ask me what milk to buy. Just buy your milk, right? But if you're about to buy a home, if you and your family are about to move, if you and your family are about to make decisions of your child going to college or your young children or whatever, situations that impact the person or the family as a unit does require prayer. And sometimes it's not going to be an instantaneous thing. But what you can also look forward to is if you pray earnestly, and especially if you're praying as a family. There's nothing more that I love to do, especially when I am having a rough day, is I will tune in to family prayer. Gosh, I love a family prayer. Because when you are praying as a family, a lot of times what I hear is opening up. Is I hear the young son, praying before dinner, and they do it as a family. And this is not just one individual family. I've got thousands of these families that do this around the planet. They're not subscribed to my YouTube, right? I don't go around and walk around and hang out with them, but I know them because they know me. They know their Elohim, and they're doing everything I want and like them to do because it enables me to give more. That's what this is about. It enables me to give more, right? I don't withhold anything from my children directly or my children of earth. Excuse me. I don't like to withhold anything. As a matter of fact, I like to open up the floodgates of bounty for all people. But if it begins to too much pride attached to that, I'll take it away. If too much interest in something that starts to lead you astray from those prayers or that spiritual intimacy with me, then we start having issues. And this is where if I can give and give and give and keep the righteous side, right? Like I always tell Cameron, right? Is, you're well taken care of, you're not spoiled. But the moment you act spoiled, or you act like you deserve something, or you act out of accordance with my will, then I call that spoiled. And then I'm not gonna tolerate a spoiled fruit. So then I will back off that throttle and start correcting all those things that made that child a sour fruit, a spoiled fruit. See, I know in human language and human terminology, some parents pride themselves like, oh yeah, my child is spoiled. Well, if you're so proud of that, why don't you go into the grocery store and pick up a spoiled banana and tell me how much you like it, because you're not going to like it. The same thing is with the humans on planet Earth. You are all my little fruits, and I want you as healthy, as vibrant, and happy, proactive, and I am married and have been eternally married to my wife consort Ashura, right? And for reasons I will explain in another video, it's not necessarily, she's not looked at in the best light in the Old Testament, which I will correct that at some point, but not today. Point is, right, she's a fertility goddess, and the woman can literally give babies out like crazy. So we're definitely trying to pump up our new earth numbers. So quite literally, these are all things that are manifesting in the physical plane due to my will and extensionally her will, right? But keep your eyes and ears open is what I mean. And you want to be alert, right? You want to make sure that you're guiding your family. You're not just on the waves letting life take you one way or the other, right? You need to take responsibility and accountability for that life and have a heading, know a purpose, know your children's purpose. If they don't have one, as a parent, you're authorized to give them a purpose until they find one that I've given them in the future. So stay the course. Raising up children as Torah taught. and God led. Elohim led. Because I know a lot of people are having a meltdown over God or means money or whatever. Really, in all actuality, God, that term, or Ged, was really, at its root, was gimme. It was gimme. Who am I? I'm asked primitive humans, right? We're talking pre-recorded civilization. We're talking the very, very first true humans, right? Teaching them language, right? And a lot of times, like my daughter, we call her Yaya. You know, that's a nickname that came about from my son when he was younger, right? So some of the words that a lot of people use and try to even now, right? Like everyone's trying to find, like, if one letter's this way, then it apparently has some entirely alternate person or meaning. If you're doing that, you're definitely not a good seed, because you're trying to get too far into the details, because you're trying to either steer someone away, or if you're trying to pull them in the fold, you're relying on things that are not directly poured out by me, right? You can only lead people to the water, but it is my water that they drink that's going to change their heart, soul, and have a rebirth. It's not going to be done by man's hands. Mankind's job is to guide the communities, guide society, guide the nation, guide the world. That's what we're doing. And we're not going to do it with sin. We're not going to do it with government takeover. We're not going to do it through meaningless war. Rephrase that. My Jewish people, my sons, Israel as a whole, you are currently you are authorized to continue your mission that I've given you. Those that are operating in Hamas and operating in Hezbollah and all those that are in support of that and those causes, that is an issue. We need them removed. Or they need to do it right about face and have a literal come to Elohim meeting in the heart and the mind for a total restoration, which I am up for. I turn no one away. No race, no creed, no gender is beyond my saving. But the heart must want it first. And I'll tell you, having a soulless person, it's almost 100% that they will never desire in their heart a relationship with the one true creator and his body, right? So, raising up children, Torah taught. I'm talking Torah as early as you can. Cameron's been learning Torah, by and large, through all things. I teach my children and I teach my churches the same way, right? As we talk, correct, and redo. You do, I kind of stop and say, okay, let's evaluate what you did. Let's review it. Do you think it was the best decision that you could have made? Let's talk through it. What other options do you think you could have had? Okay? Now going forward, if you're encountering the same situation, do you think you have the tools going forward to make the right decision? Okay, Father, I do. Perfect. Now I'm going to keep an eye out for this situation to occur again, and I want to see how you handle it. That's how I operate when it comes to everything, right? Even my marriage. And as God and married to my goddess, my consort, right? It's not all a picnic. It's not. But I can tell you, I have a relationship that I'm willing to bet is 99% better than most humans on earth. Truly. So, raising up children, Torah taught and Elohim led, that is actually going to enable the fruit, the natural prosperity, and it will allow me as the Heavenly Father to release nectar to flow freely among the people of earth. Because what everybody tries to do so hard, right? You do it with the sweat of your brow and the strength of your back. You try to accomplish things that I can give you purely from heaven, purely supernatural. Pardon me. Gosh. Oh, my throat is irritated today. So we want, obviously, the holy nectar, right? from me, from the heavens, to flow freely through humankind. Because the thing is, even if you call your societies now as a whole as Earth, even if you were to call it progress, if I had well, I'm a visual god, you know that. I'll do my last page. I'm like running out of notebooks. But, so let's say for a minute, we got a bell curve. And the sweet spot, right, is here. Top output. Okay, so, and just for my conspiracy theorists out there, that's not supposed to be some like crazy occult symbolism. That's just to encapsulate that the top output of the bell curve is what I'm going to bring to humanity, and not like the Mahdi who last night Asher and I got to laughing because we were done with dinner, we were letting the dogs out, and I was a room over, and I was like, what did you say? I was like, about the Mahdi, because we were talking about him, and I was telling her, I was like, yeah, like this guy is, gosh, like, and anyway, she was like, I don't want to talk about that nonsense. I was like, okay. Well, anyway, she goes to walk out, and then she said something, and I thought she said Mahdi. She goes, I said potty. And I started laughing. I said, that is so funny, because I was like, he could then be the king of the diaper genie. Get it? There's a lot of layers on that one. Anyway, no, so the bell curve is, right here is where you're at currently. And that is, through mass production, right? Oh, mankind's material, we're so great, we can do this. Guys, in the time domain, you're sucking wind. When the devil has his hands in all things, it is a very slow tail. And that's for his benefit. Unlike myself, I am a God of change. I am a God of righteousness, holiness. And the thing is, I want to make sure that we're going to be going up. Because I want to tell you something. Let's say that 24 hours, the devil's eliminated, all the soulless people are dead. The earth is now standing at a turning point of walking into the future. Every day, end to end, ocean to ocean, continent to continent, top to bottom, every day would be better than the last day. Guaranteed, 100% foolproof, no ands, ifs, or buts about it. Because you would not have the sicknesses that you have. And humans by nature, highly creative, highly loving, highly nurturing, very communal base. It is a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing. It's only when we have the toxins that the world craves, and the world then tells everybody else and each other that they should do it because that person did it, or they should engage in this because it's fine. They should do and it's all sinful. It's all sinful. It is. You need to be humble, meek, and let your brothers lift you up. Let your brothers edify yourselves. Let the community speak to your character. Let the works of your hands be for another before yourself. Ensure that the tummy of your children are fed before you as the adult. As the man, make sure that your wife, your spouse, is cared for in all ways, and cared for delicately and kindly. And women, ensure your man confidently that you are there for him. Women, ensure your men that you are loyal, you are adherent, because your woman should want to be and should stand firmly next to her man. But likewise, that man should stand firmly with his woman. I tell you something, and I don't like blasting this, but I have neighbors, and their neighbors I've never physically spoken with these neighbors, but I hear them all the time. And they're apparently followers of me, because I hear every once in a while on Shabbat, I'll hear the wife, she'll play worship music before a service. And I don't mean I don't mean Jesus. I mean my actual name, right? Yahuwah. They're listening to services with my real name and stuff. And I sit down on my back porch and I listen and I go, they obviously have no clue that the God of heaven is living right behind them right now. And but it breaks my heart that that's like 1% of their existence. I hear it on the occasion, and Asher has witnessed it, and so is my son Cameron, and Mackenzie, my daughter. And thing is, though, they fight, and the man, he's constantly yelling, he's constantly in a fit of anger, he's constantly saying some of the most terrible things to the children, and it breaks my heart. It does, and the thing is, these children are not inherently bad children, but they're not being taught, right? They're not being led, they're not being governed, they're not being parented in any way. And so it's a crappy thing on my end that every day, when I'm overlooking my yard and my garden and stuff like that, I have to deal with the trash. Every day I'm picking up trash and throwing toys back over the fence. But my point is, that family dynamic is not different than most families, a lot of families. And we got to change that. Like, I'm going to change that. So regardless regardless of what the world looks like today, it does not deter me from implementing my will and implementing the changes that the earth is going to receive inevitably. And that's what I mean, right? I would like to see people kind of put their hand up and say, hey, I'm volunteering. I'm going to start doing the things my Elohayim is saying. I'm going to start doing these things and start living that out, right? Every day. And as long as you're putting forth that effort, I do not expect perfection. Okay? And it doesn't mean that if your kid gets into a fist fight that he's the seed of the devil. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that when you have eyes to see, because what does that mean? Eyes to see means that you can see me, because I'm going to pull up one of my last points here, actually. Forgot I had a third page. And this actually came to me last night. Asher and I are laying in bed, and I'm so jealous. She just goes right to sleep. And I mean, I'm telling you guys, I know it's written, and I don't say that just to blow smoke. Like, I legitimately never actually sleep. Like, I lay in bed and I rest, but anytime I'm laying down in a rest state, I'm literally it's like just flipping. I go from this side to almost like a cartoon. I'm on the bed and the bed flips, and now I'm in an entirely new place. That's heaven. That's the realms. So if I do not have dominion over a person, then they're mine. And they need salvation, right? And they need guidance and a Torah teacher and a community to stand with them and help them along their journey to keep them in the right way. If they're mine, if you're my people, right? You're a spirit, a soul, or an angelic, then you essentially are choiceless when it comes to obeying the word, obeying the 10 Commandments, and you'll know me. Now, I'll tell you that the numbers are heavily skewed out of our favor, right? There's 1 per 1,000 that are going to be, handcrafted by me in heaven and put down on the earth plane. Because quite frankly, right, think of your mass-produced things, okay? Things that are mass-produced, usually they're cheap, they're the same, blah, 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 blah. But anything that's handcrafted, such as the people that are on earth, handcrafted by my hands, and my Father's hands in heaven, our hands together, right? That's what I mean. Those people naturally have that disposition to goodness. They naturally know right from wrong. They naturally know my voice. My people hear my voice, and they know their Elohayim. They know who I am. And even sometimes, right, with the face, because I know the face throws people off, right? They're like, well, I'm kind of expecting my Elohim to have, aged features and really long white hair and a really long white beard. And it's like, hey, you might be surprised that when you get up into the abode, that the same voice talks to you now, right? The same lessons that I teach you now on earth, you could find me teaching the same lessons, right, to other realms upstairs, and helping other progenitors of creations, assisting their leaders with piousness and righteousness and longevity within a civilization and a creation. Because, if you have humans and they might say, oh, I'm in the banking business, right, or I'm in the shipbuilding business, or I'm in the whatever business, right? Well, as your Elohim, right, as your God, I'm in the creation business, and a part of that is civics, basically, civilization. And I've seen it. I've seen what can be. I know what can be done, and I know how fast. So it really is. It's waiting on the tail of humanity to get together, But all right, well. Time is ticking, and I gotta get going to pick up the kids from school. So I love you guys, and hope the teaching served you well. And we'll see you next time.